On this episode, we showcase Parameta Solutions and their efforts to democratize over-the-counter derivative data across the financial industry. Hear about their collaboration with the AWS Innovation Team, where they've developed innovative data parsing solutions to extract insights from the complex, voice-driven OTC markets. Well, I am delighted to welcome Silvina Aldeco-Martinez, the CEO of Parameta Solutions. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be with both of you ladies.
And from AWS, we have Olga Miloserdova. Olga, thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
So our regular listeners might remember Parameta Solutions from an episode we did with your team. But maybe for our international audience, can you share a little bit about Parameta Solutions?
Yeah, of course. Parameta Solutions is a company that is dedicated to democratize OTC derivative data to the broader financial ecosystem. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Let's put it back in layman terms. So OTC markets, OTC derivative markets, are those markets where people transact exposures on swaps, on futures across multiple asset classes, including interest rates, including foreign exchange, credit derivatives, equity derivatives. It's a long list. But let's go back to the core. You may take a real estate mortgage opportunity with your bank, and you fix it on a 10 years at a fixed rate, which is brilliant for you. You have certainty of your cash flow disposals. The bank is offering you that mortgage, and many other entities, many other people that mortgage. Let's say they have accumulated now 500 million of an exposure to a fixed rate for the next 10 years. As time goes back, this becomes a ticking bomb. And what the banks need to do is to be able to offload the risk or manage the risk.
Okay.
And for that, they tap onto the derivatives market and they look for a swap to a kind of variable rate, or they may actually swap into a different currency. So it's a critical market to ensure you can risk manage any position that you have taken on a primary market. Enables the evolution and the growth of the world. This market in itself has been very limited to the banks that operate within it. This is about 15 to 20 banks that transact in OTC derivatives in what is called the market of the markets, the wholesale market. Parameta is trying to make the data broadly available to the broader financial ecosystem, not just keep it within the confines of the trading counterparties.
So democratizing.
That's
access.
a concept of democratizing because other entities will be able to measure and manage the risks and their exposure with the same degree of information that has been available only for a small subset of participants.
Fantastic. And that work in democratizing data, of course, Olga, is something that we do with a lot of our customers. But that also comes along with changes to your technology estate, the kind of architecture that you're building for, as well as some other changes in culture and the mechanisms that you use. Is that right?
That's very true. I mean, the process of getting the data to democratize it, it's a big, complex data challenge.
Yes.
These are markets which are illiquid, which they are not very well referenced. They are incompatible with each other. So ultimately, I would say the problem number one is a problem of harnessing, transforming, and making the data available in the form of insights in a way that it can be consumed. Which I'm sure it kind of is a challenge of many entities, irrespective of which markets we work.
Absolutely.
So technology is a key enabler. And when I was talking to Olga, I think last week, we were talking about, how are you evolving? What are the challenges? Yes. And we talked about innovation, right? So thinking about how are we going to open up and democratize the data more broadly.
Right.
Innovation is critical into that path. And we were discussing how do you establish a culture of innovation?
Yes.
And what would actually turn the organization into that flexible entity that is able to evolve and adjust to the reality? And the first thing that I said, and I think you found it different, It was, you need to have the right infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
How come? I've worked in different organizations throughout my career, and the times where I was anchored in monolithic infrastructure,
Yes.
it was impossible.
Mm-hmm.
You might have wanted to innovate.
Mm-hmm.
You might have had a footprint. You might have had a market need for innovation. But the infrastructure itself becomes so inflexible that innovation causes big repercussions across. And that becomes a barrier for innovation. So I would say, although we can talk about culture, etc., which I would totally agree, I would say the foundational basis has to be an infrastructure that enables innovation. So in Parameta, we use a modular architecture, very much API-driven, which therefore allows us to take a new piece of kit, work with this prototype, and then plug it into that ecosystem. So I would say number one, from my perspective, is a kind of architectural first setting. And I'm very pleased that exists within Parameta. I would say the second element is about the people.
Absolutely.
The people, what starts? Does the culture make people, or does the people make culture?
What do you think?
I think it has to start with a sufficient amount of people with a common frame of thought and principles. Because forcing a culture that is very dissonant with the totality of the organization, it's almost a very difficult exercise, right?
Absolutely.
It's like trying to get this round peg on the square hole, right?
Yeah.
It's
you
not
want it
easy.
reinforcing, right? And the modeling.
You do need some of those grassroots principles, curiosity, that willingness to try things out, to look for the better way. So I would say probably my number two would be people with the right curiosity, with the right intent of finding, with a much more engineering mentality. Is there a better way? Is this a problem that how can I? It's a little bit more about the how. So I would say that's probably number two. And then kind of with the anchor on the right, at least with a core set of individuals that carry that flag, is then create a culture that enables innovation to flourish, that actually recognizes the process of innovation.
Yes.
The process of innovation it's a windy road, right? We don't go like innovation success and celebration, right? It's a very windy road. And understanding it, creating the space, the incentives, and the learning environment, I would say it's probably key. But
absolutely,
it would be remiss for me not to acknowledge the partnership that we have set up with AWS. I think it's incredible in the sense that it has further developed in this partnership the sense of rapid prototyping.
Yes.
Right. And it has brought a little bit more of a structure to it, which I think in that path of creativity, setting up some of these guardrails, the sense of, speed. What can we do in 2 weeks?
Yes.
Let's frame the problem. Let's go at it. Let's try to come out with the first cut at what the solution could look like. It's a good, discipline. It kind of focuses the minds. It focuses, every contributor on the challenge. And as a result, it allows to get after 2 weeks to that sense of, oh, look at what we did.
Yes.
It reminds me of my 3-year-old, right? Her painter says, look, mommy. And there's a little bit of that sense of, okay, this is not the final product, but the first step, we did it. We did it collectively. We benefited from.
Yes. Oh, so much of what you
just
said.
Sorry.
There's so much resonates, right? No, absolutely. And Olga, it's so that idea of the culture, the mechanisms, organizational structure being maybe how you think about it, speaks so much to the work that you do with customers all the time. And I love that notion of sort of thinking big, but starting small and iterating on.
I think it's one of the critical points that you bring here. It's important to have the right people but we can't depend for continuous innovation on extraordinary individuals.
Mm-hmm.
That's just not gonna make it continuous, right? And so we're looking for mechanisms, and experimentation is a mechanism, right? And I think one of the points that we really see from working with Parameta is you got that notion of experiments, small chunks, actionable, scoped well. And I think some of the organizations, not you, miss the third element, which is empowering the teams to then go and act on these insights. And seeing how your teams operate, you have that loop. And I think the other point, as we just more broadly speaking about innovation, but using you as an example, there's in experimentation especially, so you're talking small kind of iterations to get there. There's sometimes concern, and I would like to hear your view on that, about the cost of experimentation. I think some leaders fear this a little bit. If we run a lot of experiments, the cost is going to get out of control. And I found, maybe it's a little bit too quirky, but I found the Jeff Bezos quote. He said that actually the cost of experiments is small. It only gets expensive if it works.
That's right. When
I love
scale,
that, right?
That is true. That is so true.
Yeah.
Right.
That is really true. And I think that blend of, how much you experiment, what do you actually try to bring into a scaled environment, and it becomes part of your core offering or your core process or the core infrastructure, is also a very important moment, right? Where, as we all know, resources are not unlimited. So as an organization, establishing the right framework to kind of have that that moment of understanding what would be pervasive to our customers, right?
Yes.
Where does this innovation path take us? What's the longevity of that idea, and how much further can it go versus this, which may be brilliant, but is, catered to a very narrow set of customers for a very short-term need. And therefore, there's a lot of elements that come into the balance, return on investment, etc. And I think at that point, that's when you actually, when you mobilize the whole organization around it, and then you use that technology to parse the whole data lake. It's very different than when you take a sample and you really, really kind of work with that. But that's a very, very important concept. Yeah.
An interesting point you bring around, actually, if it's not the right thing to scale, let's not.
Right.
That notion of actually stopping, let's call them bad ideas, from going forward.
Try.
Right.
Pivot. Or stay and pivot. I think that the culture of innovation needs to be a culture that is comfortable with pivoting.
Yes.
If it is wrong, reframe.
Yes.
What assumption on the articulation of the problem, or on the solution of the problem, on the technology that we chose, it's not working, or the output is not working. But it's having that. If you're curious not just at the outset. You're curious throughout,
all the way.
And when you keep that curiosity throughout, it's like your neuronal network. Just lights up on many layers.
Yeah.
So
I'm curious how you think, and just on that same theme, we always talk in this podcast about failure, about the idea that it's not an experiment if you know the answer, right?
That's true.
And what you were saying is, one of our leaders says, you got to get to the know, K-N-O-W, knowing what to build, or the no, N-O, don't build, right?
Yeah.
The no or the no. But I'm wondering how you think about creating the safety and the culture within your own community and people to say it's okay if you fail, as long as you take that as a learning and you apply it to the next. It's kind of along with that iteration, but it's okay for some things not to work, right?
I think that if you also remove that pressure point from the prototype, if we're staying in the prototyping world, the answer is not always, did it fail or did it win?
Yeah.
The process in itself is extremely value additive. How do you get to the outcome and what outcome? The people that it's not just about the outcome, it's the people that came into the process. The team, maybe it's a multifunctional team. That doesn't need to be a massive team, but maybe there's 3 people from different areas. Some are getting exposed to technology, but they come more from a understanding of the customer problem. Someone may come from a finance or from a different dimension, and this small group together attempted to resolve the problem, try something new, and they flex their understanding. So the end point, I don't think, is a success or fail. If you put a lot of pressure on success or fail in what I would define as the 2-week prototypes, then you're creating a bit of resistance to try to go there in case it fails.
Right.
And I think at that small level, I mean, it should be a bit freer.
Yes.
It's a very different story if we kind of go to first prototype, brilliant. We do another prototype on that line, and then we're evolving. The smaller prototypes, there is much more flexibility. Once we get to the third, fourth, now we need to start to involve more people. Now we need to start thinking about a bigger cut of the data set. Now we need to start thinking a little bit more about involving, some very early customers who are in our alpha roadmaps. Then the bar starts to change.
That's right.
And then that's where the concept of failure, and the failure, I would say, sometimes it's a little bit more around a return on investment, right? From a business perspective, right? If we think about it, it doesn't mean that a solution doesn't have merit. It may be a brilliant solution. It's just uneconomical to put in place, which is a different story.
Right.
Technically, it's a very solid solution, but it may be expensive for a company of a certain dimension.
That's right.
And it may be brilliant for a company of a very different dimension, right? So then some of the economic restrictions of the reality of the organization that you're leading come into play. But I would say at the level of that early stage prototype ideation, etc., I don't think there is that fail.
Yes.
Exactly.
Right.
That's not the right culture, the right framework.
We talk about fail is first attempt at learning or in learning. FA.
I like that.
Right?
Yeah, I like that.
And to your point, sometimes it's the learning that you get the most out of.
Culture. It creates a culture as well.
Exactly.
It maintains the curiosity. It maintains the mental flexibility.
Right.
Yeah.
And Olga, one of the things that I was just hearing is that we often talk about this idea of the feasibility.
Yes.
Right? Technical feasibility. Can we do it? Can we build it? The viability, which is what you were just talking about. Correct. Is it going to make a business? Yeah. And then the other one we talk about is, desirability or lovability from an end customer standpoint. And how do we ground what we're doing in that? It has to
be kind of at the early stage. There has to be a good insight, right? Because this is not a lab at a university.
That's right. Yes, that's right. That's right.
Which is a distinction, right? A lab at a university does not have to start with a business problem connected to ultimately something that will help a customer. It can help a customer because through this process we may be able to provide a better service or more quality or less cost or a more value-added outcome. But in the business world, that's how it starts. In a university lab, it can be a little bit more philosophical.
Yes.
Sure. Right?
Yeah.
But
that's right.
And also time-bound, right? Yeah. When you innovate or experiment specifically within a corporate setting versus within an academic setting, they have years to prove out a hypothesis. Whilst when we experiment within a corporate setting, I think we're trying to time-bound, right, our experiments, probably weeks, ideally, right? Like smaller steps so we can iterate faster, get those insights faster, get to that solution faster. We can't spend 5 years.
But that's perfect for a company like Parameta. And I cannot say that what it works for us may work for everybody else. But for our dimension of organization, the 2-week prototype is not something that we have to control so much because it will take so much of our resources.
Right.
It could be the case that for a much smaller, earlier stage company, those 2 weeks prototypes could be very expensive, right? So, and for other organizations, we were like, why can't you achieve in 2 weeks? It should be 2 months, and we need all of these people. So it's always in context, right? Yeah, it's always in context. So I think for us, the sort of quick prototyping that we are doing jointly with AWS, it's kind of perfect for who we are now.
That's great.
And
love it. Silvina, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your insights and journey with us. And I'm wondering where you are now. What's next for Parameta Solutions as you look to the future? And
so I think that one area where, I became the CEO of Parameta earlier this year. And as a result,
yes.
thank you. Thank you very much. And I have worked in many organizations, but whenever you come into a new company, you start looking at the whole organization with an outside-in perspective.
Sure.
You discover, strengths that those that have built them do not recognize. So one of the areas that really has been an incredible finding for me coming into Parameta is the structure in collaboration with several partners that we have put together in the creation of a data platform as a service. This data platform as a service has allowed us to parse one of the most complex data sets, that I have seen, and I've seen a lot, but that I have seen in the financial markets, which is these over-the-counter derivative markets. They operate on voice. They operate on chat. There's less than 15-20% that comes from a digital end-to-end process. And this is all of these asset classes which are incompatible with each other. Very infrequent. A lot of fat fingers everywhere.
Yeah.
So that challenge itself, when I led into Parameta and saw that, orchestration, the proprietary code, a cloud, native environment with this modular infrastructure, I'm like, wow, this is really incredible. I actually was very surprised, having come from much larger organizations where we have not been able to address some of the challenges that Parameta was solving. So I have now challenged our organization to externalize this solution and said, we have an opportunity to enable other OTC venues to also parse, monetize their own data, make their data available, allow that data, just make it available for the first time. These are data sets that are otherwise not available outside the small environment of the participants in those venues. And I'm thinking for some of those regional OTC players, they could either look at a journey of, 5 to 10 years to build kind of equivalent platforms and eventually get to a point of monetization, or we can be that partner, right? It's a partnership where we can also lend all our kind of hosting capabilities that we have set up with AWS. So we can give them an end-to-end solution in order to get to monetization faster. So what I would say is one of the things that I have uncovered in Parameta is a lot of pockets of true technology-driven solutions that were created to resolve the challenges of this specific massive trading venue that we support, but are therefore readily available for others. So we are going to be embarking in that journey of externalization, which I think is very, very interesting and super, super engaging. I think that the other part is that because there's a lot that happens on voice, there's a lot of information behind that trading moment. This moment is called, the mid price. There's a lot of information behind the mid price that is trapped in a format that is not consumable. We have run several prototypes which are looking to kind of really move mainstream, some of them, to start parsing portions of that depth of book that has never been available before. So that's going to be a journey of extracting through Gen AI, different techniques to then democratize and make available. So I would say there is Gen AI in extraction that I think it's a very interesting path of our journey. There's externalization of some of the tools that we have. And we have started, as of more recent, our journey of developing post-trade workflow tools. And we are coming at it with the eyes of a cloud-first organization which is already utilizing Gen AI in some of the processes. So we are coming at kind of these problems, applying kind of a bit more fun, innovative mindset.
Fantastic.
So yeah.
And Olga, she's speaking your language, isn't she?
This is love language experiments, scaling,
data monetization.
That's my way.
Like liberating that data that's often in silos, often unlocking the power and the potential of that.
Correct.
Olga, you see that so much, don't you?
Yes. And then ultimately creating new revenue opportunities for your organization.
It's for our organization, for our customers as well, because by making these data available, you may be a buy-side firm that has never had exposure to OTC derivatives.
And all of a sudden.
And guess what's happening? There's more and more buy-side firms, more like in the form of hedge funds or systematic traders that are coming to Parameta, getting access to the full history of over 35 years that we have on all of these asset classes, training the quant algos, and then starting to take positions in this market for the first time, generating alpha. So this journey, I mean, at the moment we have a relatively smaller set of customers on the buy side. I think it's probably about 10% of our revenue. But the opportunity at the speed at which we see them coming into our organization, becoming traders themselves for the first time in some of the trading venues of the PI Cup, I think it's demonstrated that OTC derivatives as an asset class, it's starting to shape as another alternative asset class in the same way that maybe private debt has been in the past. So I think that it's an expansion of the ecosystem. It's unlocking data that wasn't previously available. It's democratizing access to that data and ultimately expanding the ecosystem.
Fantastic. Well, Olga, thank you so much for being here. And I'm wondering if, as we finish off our episode here, if you have any final words or reflections that you would share with our audience.
I think what I take away from this conversation, we can think as a framework about innovation experimentation, but there's no one size fits all.
Totally.
And thank you for sharing what worked for you, because I think that's really important for our customers to see how others have done and also what worked and what didn't work. So I really appreciate that insight, because for some, you probably maybe saved a cycle of experiments, right? Just the way to think about this. And lastly, I think for every organization that is embarking maybe on this transformation journey, maybe culture transformation, maybe implementing new mechanisms, I think the critical point is for the leaders to start thinking, what are my priorities and what is the right mix of, what's the right balance, right? What's my risk appetite? How much can I tolerate, right? How much my teams can tolerate as well, right? To your point that you made, you can't force a culture, right? It's just going to alienate. So you need to align what you kind of, the things that you want to happen, right? And things that can happen, and find the right balance, and also the size of organization, type of problems that you're trying to solve. So thank you. So thank you for sharing those. I find it really curious.
Silvina, final words for you.
I think that it's important to persist with challenges. I think maybe that's one thing that I've observed kind of as I just mentioned, coming into Parameta, I was impressed about kind of the technology setup. And I think that comes from that concept of persisting. The data is very unruly. I was going to use a different description. It's very unruly. And the team has, stayed with the challenge, obsessed with that data, work on that data structure. I think it has created the base of the strength of who we are today. So I think that concept of persisting with the challenge, finding the right solution, finding the better way, so that you can then move at speed, so that you can move with flexibility, and start with the right architecture.
Yeah.
If we go back to the beginning, start with the right architecture. Yes.
Very good. Thank you both for sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you, Sara.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.